Welcome back, everybody, to Ravenstar's Witching Hour. I'm your host, Solaris BlueRaven, and I'm here with my brilliant guest, Susanne Posel. And what a fascinating conversation. I must say you are very, very intelligent with this information. It's mind-blowing. And at the same time, it's disconcerting, to say the least. I mean, it feels like there's just this black hole. This world has become a black hole. I don't know what your impression is. And do you think there's a way out of all this? I mean, do you really think there's a way to resolve any of this, or do you think we're just going to have to write out all this stuff and this quote-unquote New World Order?
Well, I was having a discussion with a friend of mine today about this subject, and I think that there are three questions that are not being asked, and therefore we're not seeking these answers, and I think that they are very important questions. And if we are honest with ourselves, and we don't have to tell anybody what the answers are, I'll pose them to you if you want, Solaris, but and the audience, please ask yourself these questions. And you don't have to tell anybody. You don't have to answer me either. But do we really want this to stop? Do we really want this to stop? How angry are we? In order to make this stop, we're going to have to be extremely inconvenienced. Are we ready for that? Do we really want to do the actual physical labor it takes to be self-sustaining? Do we really want to use as much brain power as it's going to take to become self-sustaining? And depending on that answer, we have to move to the second question. How do we make this stop? If the answer to that question was yes, the next logical question is, how do we make this stop? Literally and seriously. Not complaining, not running around on whirling dervishes about what might have been, what could have been, what possibly, all these theories and postulations and suppositions and dot connections based on theories and more theories and more theories. And let's deal with what's actually happening. And if we do that, we can find actual solutions. Now, like I said, it's going to be a huge inconvenience.
Mm-hmm.
Are you ready for that? And if the answer is yes, and the answer is yes to the second question, then the third question is, what are we going to do after we have stopped it? After the dragon has been slain, after it's over? What are we going to do? Let's really sit down and talk about that. I don't expect that answer to even have a viable answer. If it's going to be immediate, we need to sit down and have actual discussions. I see a lot of my friends in independent and alternative circles, and I'm talking about broadcasters and journalists and not the audience, but the people that you're listening to and reading and getting information from. And there's a large group of us that are really sick of the spin and the disinformation and the just flat out lies that are going on. The fact that we're not talking about evidence, the fact that we're not talking about what's really happening, the fact that we're still talking about JFK and they're poisoning us every single day. That we know that chemotherapy has a 4% success rate, but we're still going to these doctors. That we know, or maybe you don't know. Here, let me fill you in on cannabidiol, CBD. The government has known about it for a long time. In fact, they patented it in 1940. They're currently, in the next year, 6 to 9 months to be specific, the National Institutes of Health will be launching a study on CBD and its effects on AIDS patients, because they've noticed that when they use CBD, the AIDS patients become much better. So they want to see how effective CBD can be used in combating AIDS. And just recently, Huffington Post was crying about MH17 and saying, oh my God, now the cure for AIDS could have been on that plane. And now we don't have the cure for AIDS because of what happened. And that's media spin, okay? That is designed to get you to emotionally react because we already have the cure. We have the cure for everything. It's called cannabidiol. It will cure everything. It breaks the blood-brain barrier, so it's going to cure neurological disorders. And it's been shown to relieve many neurological disorders, including disorders that you would be taking antipsychotics for, like bipolar and schizophrenia. It's been shown to cure people from gluten allergies and other diseases that we get because we have what's called a leaky gut, A lot of autistics have a leaky gut, and this repairs that area. Did you know that your immune system is in your gut? You really want to make sure that that runs exactly as it should. Cannabidiol tells cells in your body that are not behaving the way that they should be, and that includes cancer cells, to turn off. And you just expel it naturally. I'm not going to go any further than that. It just tells them to turn off, and they do. And it boosts the immune system of the cells that are behaving the way that they should, and helps them to propagate and function better. Mm-hmm. Why are we not using this as a supplement every day and in high doses when we need it? There was a little girl a month ago who, at 7 years old, was having over 300 seizures a day, and her mother gave her cannabidiol in a solution, drip under her tongue. There's something about the saliva and the cannabidiol getting into your system. There's something about the way that your saliva breaks it down, that it's the most effective way to get it in. And this little girl didn't have a seizure that day when she had the cannabidiol, or the day after, or the day after that, or the day after that. And as long as her mother was giving her cannabidiol, she wasn't having seizures.
That's great.
It works for inflammation and arthritis. So baby boomers listening, start taking cannabidiol. Find a dose that is right for you. I can tell you that there are 0 side effects to cannabidiol. 0 side effects, 0 adverse effects. You can consume as much of it as you want. In fact, they've done studies on that, on high consumptions of cannabidiol. It doesn't make them but you won't even get a stomach ache.
That's awesome. Where is this available for people? They can purchase it online, or how does that work?
You can purchase it online. There's many places. You have to be careful. There are some companies in the cannabidiol industry that have products that are laced with heavy metals or radioactive isotopes. There's Erythritol, which is a company that you can find on my website that does not have any of that in it. It's a low dose. It's not meant to be, if you have a serious illness, you want something with a higher dose. It's meant to be a life cycle tool that you use. That it's a low dose. It's like a cert, so you just suck on it and it gets in. You take about 2 or 3 a day. I've been taking it because after my daughter, I noticed that my knees don't want to work very well, and I live in a 2-story house. So I started to notice during the winter here in Washington that I dreaded walking up and down the stairs, and I'm just not that kind of person. So I started taking the cannabidiol, and I can run up and down the stairs without a problem. When I don't take the cannabidiol, I can't. And the best way to see whether or not the cannabidiol is working is stop taking it. And you'll start to feel those aches and pains again, and you'll know that it was actually working.
That's interesting. So that doesn't make you loopy at all. So this isn't CBD isn't like the THC, right?
No, THC is the psychoactive.
Right. Okay.
This is the molecule in the hemp and marijuana plant that is the healthful, the medicinal part of the plant.
Right.
So if you're going to go into a dispensary, some dispensaries do offer high CBD content marijuana with low THC. You can't get rid of all the THC. It's just impossible. And by the way, Monsanto is infiltrating the dispensaries right now. Mm-hmm. So be careful that synthetic versions of cannabidiol is not going to work the same as natural. Your body's not going to react the same way. In fact, just as a rule of thumb, and just so that you know, synthetic vitamins and minerals that are placed into your food, like when they cook all of the good stuff out of the milk, well, they have to because of the mastitis and all the pus and bacteria and the way that they treat the cows, they have to cook the milk. But when they inject the synthetic vitamin D into it, your body doesn't even take that in. Any synthetic vitamins or minerals your body automatically rejects. You just expel it out. So you get no benefit from vitamin D fortified milk that has been pasteurized. So right. I would assume that it would be exactly the same with your body with synthetic CBD. But these dispensaries offer CBD or marijuana with high CBD content. And if not, you can ask the dispensary if you live in a place where you can get it. Or the one thing I do want to make clear is with erythritol, CBD itself by FDA standards, is considered a food ingredient. So we're not talking about getting a medical marijuana card. We're not talking about moving to Colorado or Washington State. This is, by the FDA's definition, a food ingredient. So there is no regulation over it. You can purchase erythritol with or without a license in that state, whether or not the state allows people to use medical marijuana or not.
That's awesome. With all this synthesizing they're doing with all these ingredients, it makes me wonder what our DNA is becoming with all the manipulation that's going on with GMOs and this and that. And you can't escape this. You can't escape the modification of our food supply. So what do you think is going on? What do you think is happening to our DNA?
Well, we're being altered. Mm-hmm. We're not functioning properly, and that's evident in the fact that Generation Xers are the first generation that are going to die before their parents. Mm-hmm. So most of us, our parents are going to bury us.
That's pretty sad.
That is. Our children are having a hard time functioning because they're being exposed to massive amounts of chemicals at a young age. And it's not just in the known, but it's in the unknown. I did an article recently about Trident that is a replacement for BPA free. Now, Trident is made by Eastman Kodak, or Eastman Chemical Company that used to be Eastman Kodak. And Camelback, who is a retailer and also a government contractor for our soldiers, offers a 3-liter filtration device that the soldiers wear on their back. And it is made specifically with Trident. Just so that you understand, the reason why they put BPA is not just because the chemical is absolutely horrible and it does havoc on our bodies, but it's because it is a binder that the plastic needs. It helps the plastic keep its shape. Mm-hmm. So when they took the BPA out, they had to find something else that they could put in its stead. So they chose Trident. Now, let me just go over the adverse effects of Trident, because we all know what BPA does to us. Mm-hmm. Severe drowsiness and dizziness, excitability, headaches, anxiety, vomiting, nervousness, sleep disorders, urinary dysfunction, heart palpitations, hallucinations, seizures, tremors, and macular disorders, eye disorders. Jeez. So when I looked at these adverse effects, I noticed that in some places it's in direct correlation with symptoms that refer to Gulf War syndrome or post-traumatic stress disorder. If you are anxious and can't sleep and have high anxiety, they tell you have PTSD. Maybe it was a low-dose, long-term exposure to the chemical Trident while you were in service, and you are feeling the effects of that chemical. Now, you're not going to be treated for the chemical, because you're being treated for post-traumatic stress disorder, so they have you on an antipsychotic, which will eventually make you completely psychotic. Mm-hmm. And it will never alleviate your symptoms because you have been poisoned by Trident. And Trident is not just for the military. They are a retailer. You can purchase them, Dick's Sporting Goods. I'm sorry, guys, but you sell their Camelback products. And Camelback just recently put out the Relay filtration pitcher, which is the rival to the Brita water filtration systems that are out in Target and everywhere else you can possibly imagine. Mm-hmm. So you're probably drinking out of something that has Trident in it and not knowing it because it's BPA free.
Good point. Yeah. This goes on and on, doesn't it?
It really does. It goes on and on. We need to know what is actually happening, because we need to tell Camelback and every single manufacturer and company that uses Trident that we're not buying their products anymore. Exactly. And we need to really do that.
And I think a lot of people just don't know. I mean, they're going in and purchasing these products. They don't have any idea, what they're getting.
No, we don't pay attention. Mm-hmm. And it's not sensational.
Right.
And it's not crazy, and it doesn't come with this insane picture and this crazy headline and all these crazy, stories flashing in your brain and all over YouTube and all of these people trying to figure it out. It's just this one instance where a joke that goes on in alternative media that, they'll just replace that with something even worse. They actually did it. And here's the proof. And so you can now make a conscious decision whether or not you want to use BPA-free that has trident in it. And the more people that make that conscious decision, the less money the Camelback and Eastman Chemical Company will have, and they will have to cower.
Mm-hmm.
And this time, we shouldn't fall for it.
Exactly. I agree. Yep. Seems like we really have to use a lot of discernment when we're picking up our any type of products these days, no matter what it is. So have you done any updates on the Fukushima?
No, I haven't. I have not even had time.
Okay.
I know that Michio Kaku has been talking a lot about what's going on in Fukushima, and he's been on Democracy Now! Talking about that.
Mm-hmm.
I know that the information that's coming out of Japan by the media is highly censored. They have a legal law now by the government that all of the information has to come from TEPCO themselves or the Japanese government. Any information that is leaked out will be is a criminal offense, and you can go to prison.
Mm-hmm. I heard that.
So these journalists are not reporting on it. And then we have a lot of information that may or may not be credible coming out because the information that we have access to, people might not really understand. Just because you have a Geiger counter in your hand doesn't mean you understand how radioactive material works or even how our bodies work with it. The iodine purchases that are still going on is evident of that. Mm-hmm. Iodine only works for the first 160 days of direct exposure, which no one in North America got. We got indirect exposure, and we're continuing to get. So the iodine is actually causing problems in your body. You need to stop taking that. Mm-hmm. If you want to take something, zeolite, it eats radioactive material in your body, and that's all it does, and you just expel it out. And you can take as much of that as you want for as long as you want. It's not going to do any damage. All it's going to do is look for radioactive material in your body and eat it and die and go away.
Well, that's good. How do you spell that?
Zeolite. Ziolite.
Nice. Okay. That's a good one. Yeah, that's a good point. You know, it's interesting because a lot of people were on that roll of picking up the iodine so they could, block themselves from getting contaminated.
Right, and it's because we don't understand and we get scared. Mm-hmm. And there isn't a lot of good information. That's why good information is so important. A lot of people are poisoning themselves and have been because they were taking and still are taking high doses of iodine.
Or was it iodide? I think it's iodide, isn't it?
Iodide, I'm sorry.
I said iodide too. Iodide. I know I corrected myself. Like, wait a minute. No, that's not it. That's monkey blood. I think we used to call it that.
But you can go online and buy zeolite for $20.
Right. Well, that's great. Yeah, I think that's a good point to be made, Well, I know a lot of people were all panicky, and, that's another thing, too. You do have to do the math and the research and make sure you're not overreacting to a situation. But I know that Fukushima is just a mess. I mean, that's just it's unbelievable what's happened over there. And it is concerning because now everybody's keeping their mouth shut, so you don't know what's going on.
Sure, absolutely. And they had people going in to inspect, and they were carrying around Geiger counters that were encased in lead. So obviously the readings are not going to be good. They're not going to be accurate.
Exactly.
The reactors are melting down. We have steam coming out of reactor 3. I wrote an article that got so much news coverage that within 24 hours, Gizmodo and USA Today responded to my article. Mm. I was impressed. Mm-hmm. And I don't remember the gentleman's name. He's very, very well known as a nuclear expert. In fact, that's what he's made his living off of now, being somebody who goes on interviews to explain nuclear problems and especially what's been going on in Fukushima. Trade Winds is a portion of the name of the group that he started with his wife, to say that it was steam, that it was from cold and hot mixing together, kind of like when you go outside in a cold day when it's snowing and you breathe out. Mm-hmm. This is not that kind of steam. this steam has been captured in the middle of 85-degree weather in Japan coming out. So that theory goes out the window on video. TEPCO has admitted that the encasement has already melted through. And the groundwater 3-mile radius out is completely highly contaminated. So that leads to a probable postulation, and I understand it is a postulation because I'm not there, that with what they've admitted, that the molten core has melted through and is now in the ground. And so we're not talking about just an explosion. We're talking about an actual direct contamination of that, and it's going to continue to spread. But to downplay what's happening there by saying, oh, well, it's just atmospheric differences between heat and cold is absolutely ridiculous. And I'm not telling you this so you can go and freak out, but you have to be aware. I wrote an article earlier this year because I was doing research on another article and I was looking at studies, and I found this study. It was in the bottom right-hand corner, and it said Fukushima, and I was like, oh, okay. So I right-clicked that and saved it. And I went back to it a couple of days later, and I slapped my forehead. I was like, oh my God, this study was done on January 15th of this year. And this was a study to explain what the long-term effects of radiation are on the human body. Now, they only have a few examples to go by: 3 Mile Island, Windscale in the UK, Chernobyl, and Fukushima. Fukushima, they're still studying. We don't know what the long-term effects are of because we're in the midst of the study of the long-term effects, and they point that out in the study. But based on the other three, they've come to the conclusion that they don't know what an acceptable dose of radiation is for a human. So they're recommending that humans not be exposed to radiation or radioactive isotopes at all. That means that when the news about what's going on in California and the wave coming through and the kelp and the fish being highly radiated and everything's okay, they went out there and they, with their little Geiger counters, and they did their study, and they said it's all fine, don't worry about it, it's acceptable levels of radiation. And even the CDC immediately raised the acceptable dose of radiation that we're allowed to have, even though 14,000 children died and went underreported right after Fukushima happened because of exposure to high doses of radiation. But never mind that. Just go by what I just told you. On January 15th, the National Institutes of Health did this study, and they came to the conclusion that they don't know what an acceptable dose is. So when the CDC says it's this, that's an absolute, they pulled that out of their butt because they don't know what an acceptable dose is. We know that even small amounts of exposure over a long duration of time accumulates in our body and causes disease. And larger, under short amount of time, expedites that problem, and everywhere in between. So it's safe to assume, and I am assuming, I'm not a medical doctor, I'm just telling you what they came up with in the study. And they are telling you that no dose is acceptable. All doses of radiation will cause havoc and harm and disease to your body. So we have a huge problem. Fukushima is a very big problem. It's the same problem we had with Chernobyl, and we're living with it. We all have a little bit of Chernobyl inside us.
Right? Yeah. It's a slow bleed, isn't it? It really is. That's what it feels like anyway. And yet people just have, they're oblivious. A lot of people are. I mean, we're on, obviously we're paying attention to what's going on, but a lot of people don't. They don't tune in. That's really unfortunate. But yeah, I don't see a resolution to a lot of this stuff. I mean, it's just kind of like, just keep marching through, I guess.
We have to make a conscious decision. We have to go back to those three questions. Do we really want this to stop?
Well, I could say yes.
Well, that means you're willing to put down all of your technology, if need be.
Oh, yeah.
That you're willing to learn how to make all of your food from scratch, if need be. Not that you have to, but you should learn how. that you have a sewing machine, that you have a toolbox, that you're able to, if you have to, repair your own roof or fix your own plumbing or dig a well.
They did it in the old days. A lot of the pioneering ancestors, my ancestors, did it. And when push comes to shove, I think you really have to make the choice. Do you want to live in a world that's dysfunctional yet technologically advanced, or do you want to just go back to your own spiritual consciousness and your own sanctuary of the mind and just be at peace? I don't know. I mean, to me, peace means a lot. Simplicity of life means a lot to me, but I can't speak for everybody else.
It does mean a lot to me as well. And I can't speak for anyone else either. And to report on this news every day and see that in the 3.5 years that I've been writing these articles and part of alternative media, nothing has changed. In fact, It's gotten worse. So maybe, and this is just a thought, maybe our modus operandi and our tactics don't work. Mm-hmm. And as prideful as we might be around that, maybe what we're doing, the way in which we are addressing this issue, is ineffectual. And the good part about that is it means that we are open now to new ideas. Mm-hmm. We are open now to new ways of actually changing what's going on. People are going to wake up whenever they're going to wake up because people decide what's important to them. And it might be like in the Lego movie, that until the micromanagers are actually on the ground micromanaging everybody and spraying them with the Craggle, that they actually turn around and start fighting back. It may be at the absolute last second that everyone goes, whoa, wait a minute. You said what? No, forget that. I'm not doing that. And that would be awesome. And that would be really dramatic too. But we have to start acting like we're not participating in this anymore. I mean, come on. If your friend or your sister or your mother or your aunt or any woman that you know came to you and said, my husband is beating me, and came back the next month and said, we worked everything out, and then came back 2 weeks later and showed you her black eye, and then came back 3 days later and said, well, we're working everything out. How long would it take for you to tell her, you're doing this to yourself? You don't have to be in this relationship. You can leave. It's going to make you uncomfortable. You might lose some of your income. You might lose some of your comforts. You might have to go through all this stuff with the kids, and you might have to get your own place, or you might be broke for a little while, but you'll have your freedom and your self-respect. And people who have self-respect and understand their freedom, that they are free, you're as free as you want to be, really, seriously, then they don't put up with certain things. They don't put up with abuse on any level, personally, professionally, or governmentally. They just don't put up with it. Mm-hmm. We need to start acting like that. We need to grow some thicker skin and realize that not everybody is going to like us, and not all of us are going to be on TV, and we're not all as talented as our mothers said we were. But we're all here, and we all love and care about each other. And that's a general, absolute feeling that we have, and we act on that all the time. People genuinely do the right thing when prompted to. Mm-hmm. When a situation gives them the ability to help someone, or even helping an old lady across the street, we do that. If we see someone on the side of the road, we know that the hitchhikers are going to kill us and all that stuff, and people still pull over and help people fix their tire.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah, everyone has a boiling point also. I mean, it's I do see a breaking point at some time, but also the planet is going through its own collapse. I mean, it's going through what I would suspect is a magnetic field collapse. So we might lose our technology, without the push of the people. Might just go to zero because of what's happening with the anomalies on the world.
Well, yeah, we should look at, maybe we don't understand what's going on in the universe and in our solar system. And that we don't understand that there is a large, influential inner working of how things operate that has to do with electricity in our universe than we were ever taught. Mm-hmm. And that this absolutely has everything to do with even the way that our brains work. Our thoughts are electrical impulses.
Exactly.
So without electricity, you're not going to think. So if we understand that the sun is electrical, and that the solar wind is not some wind, and it's not like weather like we have here on our planet. It is the filamentary connection between the electricity coming from the sun to all of the planets, and that our magnetosphere is our shield against a lot of this electromagnetic bombardment. But we're having a problem right now. It's shifting. It's moving. I think the north is in Siberia now, the last I read.
That's where it's heading, yeah. Yeah, I think that's correct. Yep.
And all of this is affecting us. It's moving us into a colder period. This is not anything new. This has happened. In fact, it happens, I think it was every 180 years.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not getting warmer, we're getting colder. If we understand that that's moving and that's where we're moving to, a lot of things concerning this subject really start to make sense. Not only the way that we're reacting to each other, because there have been studies that have been done on solar activity and violence on this planet. And they've noticed that with high levels of solar activity, which would be the sunspots, which have electrical properties to them, that we become more violent on this planet.
That's interesting.
So there's a lot that we don't understand. And I think that we are technologically advanced with a dark ages mentality, where we're still scared, we still don't understand, and we start to concoct all of these crazy ideas and what we consider mystical revelations, but they're really just, we're trying to understand what the heck is happening here. And we don't know, and so we're trying to come up with these ideas, no different than when our ancestors were looking up in the sky and they saw constellations. And so they came up with animals and said, okay, that animal is in charge of that. That is their way of understanding what's going on. And as advanced as we are, and there are brilliant people out here writing amazing code. I mean, think about just video games. You went from 64 bits to 128 bits, where it looks like it's actually happening right in front of you. Right. And virtual reality is just around the corner with Oculus Rift and Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
And we still are terrified of the boogeyman underneath our bed. We don't understand how there is no coincidence. What we pay forward actually comes back to us, and that's just obvious. And how we affect everything else with I guess you would call it the butterfly effect. That what we do here has ramifications that go out, like a little drop in a bucket of water, and the ripple effect.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it permeates through all dimensions, really, when you think about it. And that's another thing. I mean, what's being put out to the universe right now isn't real positive on a global scale. I mean, it's just chaos in motion here on this world. So, with all the work that you do and the research that you've done, how much damage control do people do to try to shut you guys down or shut you up or your articles?
I've had my day in the sun. I wrote an article in 2012 about the gauze virus that would or could potentially be used. Kaspersky Lab found this. It could be used to shut down the banking system. The banks would say that there was a banking holiday and that they needed to clean out all of the computer systems, because I don't know if you guys are aware, but the banks have their own computers, and then those servers are connected to larger banks, and then those servers are connected to the larger banks. So at the end of the day, you've got about 3 or 4, maybe 5 servers connecting all of them. So you'd hit those main servers, you hit them all. And if they use the gauze virus as an excuse to shut down internet banking and online banking and ATM banking, then they could say, oops, we don't know how much you had in your account because it was a number on a computer screen, and the virus wiped everything out. And after I wrote that article, somebody wrote a DMCA notice of takedown, Digital Millennium Copyright Act, and held my website hostage until I took down that article. So I did take down the article. I rewrote the article and then put it back out the next day. And we got hit massively by my website at one point was hacked 40 times in 1 year.
Oh my gosh.
at one point it literally melted everything. We had to have a new theme. We had to have new everything. I had to hand put all of my articles back in. 2,000 articles, and only a fraction of that made it back into the website.
Oh.
It was terrible. My website was down for 3 weeks, and I cried for most of those 3 weeks. But and most of it has been about banking and Bitcoin, and some of the articles that I've written about, like the CNP, and exposing things about our media that is not right and just doesn't sit well, and it never did feel right to begin with, because it wasn't right to begin with.
Yeah.
But this information is extremely important. I don't get paid for this. I don't get paid by anybody for anything that I do. And I write about 5 or 6 articles a day, 6 days a week. And I do this simply because journalism used to be this grand thing where journalists would look for corruption and find evidence to prove it, and then go and write an article about it. And then things would actually change, and people would be embarrassed, and corporations would have to change what they were doing, and CEOs were exposed, and people had a conscious choice that they could now make with actual good information. And so I've taken that ideology of what journalism originally was and what it was intended to be, and tried to recreate that, at least somewhere on the internet. And I know that I'm not alone. And I'm lucky. I started the U.S. Independent, which is part of Foundation Media, that a publishing house that I opened. And with the U.S. Independent, we have 26 contributors right now, from all over the world, from all walks of life, not just broadcasters and journalists, but also Juris Doctorate attorneys. I even have a couple of people who are on staff who used to write for mainstream and got sick of all of the good exposing corruption getting edited right out of their material before it made it to print. So they write for us, and we don't edit any of the content.
Excellent.
So at least I know, and I know I'm not the only one, but at least I know that there are 2 places on the internet where I'm not trying to scare you. I'm not going to talk about the fear porn. I'm not interested in what I can't prove. We can have a discussion about it, and I usually talk about a lot of my opinion when I do radio interviews. But when it comes to news, the information that a journalist disseminates to their audience should be factually based, because that means that the audience now has the power, the information, the knowledge to become wise and not fall for it, choose not to participate in it, and actually change it. And if we can do that, then things will start to shift, not in their favor. It won't keep getting worse. It'll get better in our favor.
I agree. Yeah, it's so corrupted. I'd like to see actually all the mainstream, all of that just go completely. Just disconnect all those big areas, networks, everything. Just take them all down. They're worthless. I mean, it's better to have no information than information like that. So,
absolutely. I was watching an episode of the Colbert Report the other day, and it was amazing. He opens up the show talking about Gaza and what's going on with MH17 had just fallen, and there were very little information going on, and he didn't want to talk about it. He wanted to talk about something happier. And so he segued right into immigration and what's going on at the border. And when I saw that, I was like, that's how they do it. That's the distraction, folks. Let's not talk about the women and children and the people who have 58 seconds to get from upstairs to downstairs before they're blown to smithereens. Let's not talk about that. Let's not talk about the fact that they're using this plane going down as an excuse to start the Cold War, so they can start their manufacturing bubble, and they can build up their infrastructure for Russia and the United States, while putting both citizens of both countries more and more in debt, and cause this whole problem that then between the BRICS nations and the technocrats becomes the fight over gold and how much fiat is worth and who controls the global markets. Let's not talk about any of that. Let's talk about children coming across a border who are allegedly disease-ridden and gang members. And let's talk about that. Let's talk about CNP member Rick Perry with his glasses. I know I mentioned that earlier.
You did.
And talking about wasting taxpayer money to send troops down there. I'm not saying, well, you know what, folks? I'm going to say this. We all come from immigrants and revolutionaries. Okay? When the colonists came over to this country, they didn't abide by immigration laws of the Native Americans. And immigration laws have existed for over 2 centuries now. So you have to understand, it's not a new concept. So the land that the Mexicans are coming over into, it was basically their land. It was stolen, and a war was started in order to make sure that they wouldn't come back and take it. But these stories, they're not just part of history and, oh, well, it's not relevant today. Yes, it is. It's absolutely relevant today. Because how we behaved in the past and how we got to today is affecting what's happening tomorrow. And if we don't understand that and really grasp that concept, that we are not bloodless, that our hands are not clean, and that it's not about, oh, this is mine and that's yours. It's about, okay, let's figure out how to work this. And why are we being distracted all of a sudden by something going on here that's rallying everybody up and having them wave their Chinese-made flags in patriotism, while we have actual real things happening across the world and things that are coming here into this country that we're not paying any attention to? Mm-hmm. When you recognize the false flag, that is your cue to stop talking about it. Don't sit there and try and figure out how the false flag happened. I mean, it's interesting. I do it sometimes too. But the point is, I know that that's the false flag. So now your attention should immediately be diverted to everything that they're not pointing out. And not just about the story, and the other news that they're not talking about. Mm-hmm. We can figure out how to figure out the intricate details of the false flag. We're still talking about JFK, okay? And we could talk about 9/11 for as long too. Mm-hmm. And we could talk about MH17 for as long too, if you'd like. Or we can recognize that we're being put into a propaganda machine that is going to march us right into Cold War number 2 with a defense military bubble that is going to raise our debt ceiling through any roof they could possibly build over it and put us into economic straits like you've never believed. Mm-hmm. And if you want to talk about whether or not we should move to a digital currency because this form of currency ain't working so good, that would be a great way to do it because we have not recovered yet from the last bubble that burst.
Yeah, that's true too. We're really weakened. Well, do you see a war inside the U.S.? Do you see a physical war here in the U.S.?
If the CNP has their way, we will have a war. Mm-hmm. Right now, see, I'll take you back to the 1980s with the Iran-Contra scandal. And General Singlab, who was sanctioned by the Reagan administration to go over into South America and create the Freedom Fighters, he brought back a blueprint that was then picked up by Larry Pratt, who is also a Council for National Policy member. And Larry Pratt wrote a book in the 1990s called Armed People Victorious. And in this book, he talks about using the blueprint that was created through General Singlab's creation of the Freedom Fighters, these regular civilian people, into mercenary militias, and bring that idea of a militia here to the United States to create an armed militia that would fight, quote, communism. Well, when I saw a lecture headed by Larry Pratt in 2009 discussing what he meant when he talked about this in his book in 1990, I'm sitting here in 2014 and everything he's talking about has come to pass. We already have that group, and that group is directly tied to Larry Pratt, and it's called Oath Keepers. Mm-hmm. And Oath Keepers was behind and helped, not behind, but helped escalate the Bundy Ranch situation to what it became. And they were later kicked off the property. Stuart Rhodes and Oath Keepers were told not to come back by the head of security hired by Cliven Bundy himself. On tape, on video. And they showed up again at Marietta, along with the distraction, along with the CNP member Rick Perry, along with other CNP members in Congress who couldn't actually be there, like Senator Ted Cruz and Rand Paul. We need to really pay attention, because the fight that is being created here has nothing to do with patriotism or our Constitution. In fact, some CNP members right now who are actively working to destroy our Constitution. Mark Meckler, who used to be the co-founder of the Tea Party Patriots, who was ousted because he allowed the Koch brothers to give him money, which is sometimes called a bribe, in order to gain access to the inner circle to co-opt the Tea Party Patriot movement. However, Mark Meckler, who co-founded it, and the other co-founder, Jenny Martin, are CNP members, Council for National Policy, as well as both Koch brothers. So how can you infiltrate the group that you began? You can't. So this Mark Meckler has now moved on to the Convention of the States Project, which is using Article 5 in a scheme to eventually start to rewrite our entire Constitution. Now, the only way that they can really get something changed is to use patriotism. They started it in 1981 when this Council for National Policy was founded, and Reagan was put into the presidency in January of that same year. And that's not arbitrary, because a lot of members of Reagan's administration were, and still are, members of the Council for National Policy, including people who helped fund the freedom fighters, like H.L. Hunt and Ross Perot, and the head of the Coors beer conglomerate. What we're seeing right now is the red team and the blue team getting ready to do battle. Now, in the 1990s, with the blueprint of the freedom fighters being created, and then in 1990, Larry Pratt talking about how it needed to come to fruition here in the United States just as successfully as it was done in South America, and then creation of Oath Keepers with the help of Larry Pratt, and now it is extremely successful. And when a call to arms was made at the Bundy Ranch, about 2,000 people during the entire duration of the incident arrived, and more people have arrived to help out with Marietta. What we're seeing here is the blue team, the CFR, they realize that what the CNP has been talking about for 26 years is coming to fruition. In fact, it's already here, and it's growing bigger and bigger. And it's taking the disenfranchisement, the legitimate disenfranchisement of the people, and using it against them to gather up arms and start their own underground war. And I'm not saying that the reasons by which, if you're part of that organization, that you joined it are wrong. They're not. But that's how they get you involved in their own war. Because the CNP understands, like the CFR understands, that we have to destroy this country from within in order to absolutely get rid of the Constitution and be able to install a new government. Listen, folks, the International Republican Institute has been installing, with your tax dollars from the National Endowment for Democracy, fake revolutions all over the world. And all of the fake revolutions have these things in common: a fake revolution, a patsy government, IMF and World Bank coming in and taking collateral resources for debt incurred, and a new government. Whether it is a single person like Mohammed Morsi, or it is a group of terrorists like the National Transitional Council or the Syrian Transitional Council that they've set up with the UN and with the help of Hillary Clinton once they're finished with the proxy war with the Free Syrian Army. Think about this, folks. That's coming here. They're going to destroy this country, not with a revolution, because they tried revolution here. It didn't work. They tried Occupy Wall Street. They tried other modes. It didn't work. But the Patriot Constitutionals are falling for the Oath Keepers lie, and that's working. So the other team, the blue team, is preparing for this. They've been preparing for a long time because Oath Keepers has been around and been gaining ground and getting more members as they go throughout the years. So the blue team has been amassing all of this LRAD equipment and these nice little, stormtrooper outfits that our police officers are wearing now, who, by the way, they're not police officers. They're private security officers hired by your city to perform policing services. And I've written extensively about that on my website. I really highly suggest you go read about that. Mm-hmm. But
Oh, yeah.
because of that, they are being trained in military tactical operations right now with the DHS, with money from FEMA. That's where they're getting all of this new equipment from, in preparation to do battle with the militia that the CNP is gathering. And if what I'm saying is making any sense to you, I hope you understand that this fight between the red team and the blue team has nothing to do with returning this country to a constitutional republic. And you really need to understand that. And I've written about this, and I've got source links. Don't believe me. Click on the source links and read it for yourself.
Exactly. And while you're saying that, I'd like everybody to know your website one more time, too, because we're getting really close to the end of the show here. So let everybody know how to get in touch with you and your sites once again.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah.
OccupyCorporatism.com is my main website. It's all written by me. The USindependent.com is the online newspaper that we started, and there are 26 contributors. There's all sorts of information from broadcasters to opinion pieces, and we separate the information so that you understand that this is an opinion piece and this is a factual news article, because we don't want you to be confused. And we're not talking about sensational information. So if you like the weekly world news, don't visit the U.S. Independent because you're not going to get that at all, I promise you.
I love it. That's
I'm
awesome.
also my email, if you would like, and I do try to get to every email that from everyone who sends me emails, occupycorporatism@gmail.com. And I'm on wonderful shows like yours, Solaris, and thank you so much for having me on the show. You were a lot of fun to talk to.
Oh, well, gosh, I didn't do much talking tonight. I was letting you run the energy. You know, it's fantastic information. I mean, part of it's disturbing, and the other part is really incredible, and we need to hear it. So, and I really appreciate you being on tonight. It's been an honor and a pleasure, and I do hope to have you back. So you're welcome to come back anytime. But we still have a few more minutes here. But if you could change anything in this country right now on this timeline, what do you think you'd do? What do you think you'd do first?
I'd change the social ideology. I would try to change the social consciousness to get us to understand that we woke up to another dream. Mm-hmm. And the best part about those kind of dreams is you can recognize as quickly as you want that you're in another dream and wake yourself up out of it. That every time you're exposed to something that gives you that knee-jerk emotional reaction, that should be your cue to step back and find actual factual information to back that up and not make any decision based on emotions. Because I know you know what I'm talking about. You're probably nodding your head, or you will be in 2 seconds when I say this. Every time you've made an emotional decision, you had to clean up a mess, whether it was a job or maybe you broke something in your kitchen. So we don't want to get out the broom and the mop. We don't want to clean up any messes. We want to make good, informed, logical, non-emotional, non-reactive decisions so that their propaganda doesn't fall on our doorstep and create more havoc, because that's where propaganda lies, in your emotional reaction. And if you're not reacting to the information, if you step back and go, whoa, that's incredible, how factual could that be? And actually do the research. It's not a spectator sport. We're going to have to roll up our sleeves. We're going to have to learn how to be self-sufficient. We're going to have to put away some of the conveniences. And a lot of us, at least Generation Xers, they grew up with microwave. How many of you were eating kid cuisine? I know I grew up eating it. My mom, I'm sorry, I was a latchkey kid, so you eat the kid cuisine. Right. We've got to get away from that microwave mentality that if we can't have it in 30 seconds or less, we don't want it. We're going to have to learn how to grow our own food. We're going to have to learn to be conscious. We're going to have to learn to make soap. Not that we have to every single day, but if something happens, so that we can. And not self-sufficient like we're buying somebody else's MREs, which is going to give us sodium overload and kill us, but that we are educating ourselves and our children not to get away from the technological advancements in the fact that, oh my God, you can't be a part of it. It's just going to corrupt your mind. Teach people to be discerning. Teach your friends, yourself, your family members, your children, even your dog or your hamster, to be discerning, to say, okay, well, that's interesting, but that doesn't have to change my personal paradigm. I get it that you're passionate about that, but this is where I'm coming from. And be open-minded to say, well, maybe where I'm coming from, maybe my belief system, maybe my belief structure is based on a lie. And let me look at what's happening here. And have the self-esteem and the self-respect to say, you know what, I examined what you have. I don't know if that's factually based, or I don't know if I care, but I'm going to choose not to put that in my personal paradigm and let it go and pay it forward. Pay it forward, people. You would be amazed how the world around you starts to change. And I'm not getting all hokey, but I'm serious. It's practical.
Oh, yeah.
If you start being nice to people around you, people start being nice to you, and you start getting things, and your life starts getting better, and you start to have more self-esteem and self-respect. And it's cyclical.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think communities are important also. Learning a craft, learning a trade, and learning how to survive, but also working with each other and creating solid communities, I think would be a really good thing to do.
It would be. And if they're going to take that Agenda 21 idea, then let's turn it on their head. I have a friend who lives she lives in the Northeast. That's as close as I'll get. They turned her town into a transition town. So the people of the town got really, really upset. But they couldn't do anything because the city council wouldn't change any of the ordinances. So the people of the town decided to create a community and turn the transition town around on them. And they don't operate any of the programs. They took that money and said, fine, you wasted my money, whatever. And they built up their own community. And now they function as they want to.
Excellent.
So let's turn it on their head.
Exactly. No, I think that's wonderful. Yeah. So are you going to be speaking any place soon or anything like that?
I'm usually on almost anybody's radio show several times a week. I do interviews with Gary Franchi on Next News Network a couple of times a month. So if you are available to see that on cable television or YouTube, you can catch me there.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Susanne. It's been wonderful to have you on the show. I appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And stay tuned for Shining Side Out with David Dunder and Mecky. Coming up next to send you on into the night from down under. Have a great week, everybody.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio.